Thank you, Brent. First of all, can everybody hear me okay? All right, terrific. Well, thank you so much for the warm welcome and the beautiful weather. As Brent mentioned, I was in England since the 31st of March and just came home on Wednesday, the 17th. Got in about 3 o'clock and was in bed by 6:30 that night. I was shot. Got up the next morning and I hadn't done anything to really prepare, so I did my best to do a quick PowerPoint presentation and then flew down here yesterday afternoon and been delightfully hosted by Mr. and Mrs. O'Neill at their beautiful home, and here we are. So please forgive me, half of my brain is still on the other side of the world a little bit, but we'll do the best we can here. So again, thank you very much for the warm welcome and for the lovely weather. When I left Minneapolis yesterday, there were snow flurries. So it was really nice to come down here. So anyway, when John contacted me, we were on the second day of the tour that I just recently did, and he said, hey, listen, can you come down and do a presentation for us? And I said, well, it's just a couple days after I get home from England. I'll do my best. Yeah, sure, let's do it. And so I asked him what the topic should be or what I should talk about. And there's been so much because of Masters of the Air in regards to the interest about what's going on in the 8th Air Force community, not only here in the United States, but in England and also globally. So what I wanted to do is just to talk to you about what they're doing over in England in regards to preserving the legacy of the 8th Air Force, and a little bit about where that interest started and where it came from, and also talk a little bit about our educational travel program. So if you just thought you just invited this Yankee down here, I just wanted to tell you about, I do have some great connections to your wonderful state, and here's 4 reasons why. These are gentlemen that I hope some of you got a chance to know. Hap Chandler, who was, they broke the mold with that man, who was in the 491st Bomb Group. Below, of course, is Frank Murphy, the author of the fantastic book Luck of the Draw, and a staunch member of the 100th Bomb Group Foundation, and a huge supporter of the 8th Air Force, or the National Museum of the Mighty 8th Air Force in Savannah. To his right, of course, there was Henry Huey. Henry and I served together as board members on the 8th Air Force Historical Society National Board for many years, and was a great gentleman. Then, of course, the gentleman in the upper right is Robert Punchy Powell that I'm sure you're all familiar with, a 352nd Fighter Group pilot. In fact, in 2012, I got a chance to take Punchy Powell and another Georgian, Colonel Don Bryan, who lived down in Adel, Georgia. They were a part of it was like a gallery show or a Veterans Appreciation weekend, and I got a chance to take Punchy and Don Bryan to England. Punchy was just to turn 92, in fact, on his 92nd birthday. I got the pleasure of taking him to Bodney, and that was the last time he ever got to his airfield. So he was an amazing man, and there's some pictures of those 2 guys. So anyway, like I mentioned, what I wanted to talk about is just the popularity and the cultural impact of what's going on in Great Britain right now with the 8th Air Force. So the points I wanted to stress today is, when did the interest of the 8th Air Force actually become popular in the UK? Secondly, the organizations in the UK and their current status in 2024, and Masters of the Air, if you'll pardon the abbreviation, it's now called MOTA, the MOTA effect. And so how has that been accepted, and what's the interest, or how's that affected the interest in the 8th Air Force in England, and also on a global scale? And maybe just introduce a little bit about some of the what we like to call our flame keepers, and those are the volunteers in England that actually are perpetuating the individually on at a particular air base or anything along the lines of any of the organizations. And then lastly, like I mentioned, to talk a little bit about our travel initiative and the upcoming tours that we have for 2024 and 2025. So just a show of hands, Edna, you don't count. How many have been to England? How many have actually been to England? How about rural England? Not London, not out in the countryside. And how many have actually been to some of the 8th Air Force bases? That's not bad. That's good. And secondly, how many, I know we went around the room here, how many had relatives in the 8th? There. Wow, that's fantastic. The bases and so forth that we actually cover, I'll talk about those in just a second here. But so when did the interest of the 8th Air Force begin? Well, it began in the war. Here's these strange people from across the world, these colonials coming over here that are invading these small little hamlets and villages, and suddenly the whole portion of East Anglia, and for that matter England, is covered by Americans. And I think even today, the British and the Americans, we have kind of a mutual fascination with one another. We're very interested in the royal family and what's going on, and we love the British accent. And they're always just kind of fascinated with us because there's lots of portions of America. They're very interested in, like where I came from, Minnesota, and they most of them don't know where that's at, and I have to explain it to them a little bit, and they don't and the vastness of America and all the things. So anyway, there's always been a fascination with one another, and I think that certainly carries on today. The reason why I showed this is the actual Roll of Honor that is contained in St. Paul's Cathedral. And maybe just as a beginning to show when that interest really began and the appreciation that the British had. This is the Roll of Honor that was actually commissioned and dedicated by General Dwight D. Eisenhower. He literally brought this book into St. Paul's, and it was going to be on permanent display on the condition that the public could see this book, and that every day, and I'm sure you've probably seen it at the replication in the museum in Savannah, every day. And what's contained in the book is all the names of the Americans killed in action. The major majority are 8th Air Force. So every day, the verger comes out, he takes the key, opens it up, and they turn a page. And they close it every single day since 1946. And this is contained in the American Chapel that was dedicated by then sitting Vice President Richard Nixon and Queen Elizabeth II in 1958. And this is where the Roll of Honor is contained, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. As Brent mentioned, the pillar, really the pillar, was this gentleman who was a farmer in a little village called Dedham, halfway in between Colchester and Ipswich. And this, of course, is Roger Anthony Freeman. He wrote over 60 books on the 8th Air Force, and his pillar book, of course, was the one that you'll see here up on the left-hand side, The Mighty Eighth. But he actually wrote a trilogy. After the success of The Mighty Eighth, he wrote another one called The Mighty Eighth War Diary, and then The Mighty Eighth War Manual. And those are kind of the three required books that you have to have in your library as an 8th Air Force enthusiast. You got to also remember, God bless Don Miller for writing his book. He did a great job, but he had internet, email, cell phones, things along that line. Roger started collecting data and information in the 1950s, and he wrote letters. He went out of his way to try, and there were still a lot of World War II veterans that were still active in the Air Force, and he would get a chance to meet them in England, interview them, and things on that nature. So he didn't have any of this cool technology that we had. I mean, you got to remember, he sat down and wrote clearly today the best work, the most stellar piece on the 8th Air Force, the Mighty Eighth. It's well over 50 years old. It was first published in '69 in England, and then it came here in 1970. And I think it's gone through about 150,000 copies sold in its lifetime through about 7 or 8 different printings. So he was really the guy that really started the ball rolling about the interest of the 8th Air Force. He was also a very frequent guest at our National 8th Air Force Historical Society reunions. I had the pleasure of listening and as he conducted numerous historical lectures and symposiums. And then upon his suggestion or whatever, when he took ill with cancer in 2004, I took over the job and did and carried on his legacy of doing the symposiums at the national reunions. I'll tell a little story on Roger. He'll probably meet me at the pearly gates with a baseball bat, but no. Anyway, so he wrote this monolith book, and he went out to shop for a publisher. And so his working title was the United States Army Air Corps, 8th Air Force, 1942 to 1945. Well, yeah, that's what the book is, but it's not a real big grabber of a title. So it was Ian Allen, the publisher in England, said, Roger, can we come up with a different name? Just something that's got some pop or something that's very impactful. And so they kind of left it to him, and this is a true story. He told me this. He was taking a bath, and he was laying in the bath water looking up, and he thought, the giant eighth, the super eighth, and he literally came up with the term the mighty eighth while laying in a bathtub. And he called up his publisher, and they said, that's terrific, that's what we'll call it. Now look, now our museum's named that after it. So that's a little story on Roger. This is kind of an interesting picture. There's an air base called Leiston where the Yoxford boys, the 357th Fighter Group, flew out of. That was Chuck Yeager, Bud Anderson, Kit Carson, some of their big aces. There was a guy by the name of Otto Diddy Jenkins. And in March of 1945, Diddy Jenkins completed his second tour. He had 8.5 aerial victories. He's going home, and he said, okay, boys, watch this. And he came in and absolutely ripped up the field, just a lot of low passes. And the last low pass, he kind of missed it or miscued it, and he clobbered a tree, and he was killed. Tragic. So I know where the tree is at Leiston. I've been there, and if you look hard enough, there's still pieces of the Mustang that are still scattered around. And so Roger knew about this, and that's a picture of him climbing up in the tree to look at the damage of what Diddy Jenkins' Mustang did to the tree back in the late 50s. So anyway, so how is the 8th Air Force remembered in England today? Well, each air base, each installation has something either that's left from the war or some sort of a memorial. They might be in the grandeur of this one up in the upper left, which is at Steeple Morden. That's a memorial to the 355th Fighter Group, the Steeple Morden Strafers. And then on the bottom right, of course, is the beautiful museum at Thorpe Abbotts dedicated to the memory of the 100th Bomb Group. In fact, there's so many memorials. There's even a book about it called The 8th Air Force Remembered by George Fox. And it goes through all the different memorials, whether large or small. They're all located around the UK. So here's some of the other ones. This is the top of the upper left, the top of the 100th Bomb Group Memorial Museum, the greenhouse, if you will. The 453rd, the 384th in the bottom left, and then the 390th Memorial Museum at Framlingham. So there's all kinds of different things, and most of these memorials have either been subsidized by the bomb group or fighter group associations here in America. And so they finance these things with the cooperation of the British, and in some cases the British have also either financed it themselves or it's been a cooperative effort. So just as an example here, this of course is, as Brent said, certainly was very, very well done and very well recreated. This is the control tower that was at Thorpe Abbotts. So if you look at that picture on the left, you can see the dilapidated control tower, and that's what it looked like in 1977. It was basically a bird's nest. It was deserted. It was in a very, very bad shade of disarray. And there was a gentleman by the name of Mike Harvey. And he got a bunch of local volunteers, and they said, we're gonna turn this back into a memorial museum. Spent a lot of years and a lot of money. There was a lot of contributions given to the effort by the 100th Bomb Group Foundation here in the United States. And this is what she looks like today. I was just there last week, and the volunteers in that place are just godsends. They're just so immersed into it and so happy to share the information. Mike Harvey, the gentleman, and now you can kind of see about the legacy a little bit. Mike Harvey passed away in 2005, and now the chairman, or two of the real heads that still operate the museum, not only in the memory of their father, but also, of course, in the memory of all that served at Thorpe Abbott's. Deborah and Mike Harvey Jr. are on the board and have a lot to do with the museum. Now, on that note, we'll talk about this here in a minute about MODA. Usually, they have 2 open days on weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. They used to have 4 volunteers. And they would expect usually probably on a good weekend, if the weather was nice, 50 to 60 people would come through the tower. They charge no admission. They've got a fantastic gift shop with contributions, and what they sell in the gift shop, that's how they keep the lights on, so to speak. So now that Masters of the Air has come along, now they need 8 to 10 volunteers on an open day, and they're expecting on any given day right now on a Saturday or Sunday, 300 to 350 people are coming through the museum. That's the impact of what this mini-series has done to Thorpe Abbott's. But yeah.
Just a question, who owns that land? Like, is that still U.S. Air Force?
No, it's actually private property. There's a I don't know, he's some sort of royalty. Sir Rupert Mann is the name of the gentleman who owns the property. Most of the airfield now, of course, is turned back into agriculture. There's a few spots of the perimeter track, part of the main runway, but he owns the majority of the land. And so he did a 99-year lease for the use of the land, and so that's who actually owns it. But he actually, on certain occasions, at least for our tours, he'll allow us to go over to the other side of the field and kind of go through some of the backwoods. John and I have done that, and it's almost kind of, what would you describe it, spooky in a way? Some of the old buildings, and it's kind of almost, I don't want to say haunted, but it's kind of eerie, and it's really interesting. So anyway, here's another example of the 95th Bomb Group. This is the Red Feather Club. And the Red Feather Club was the non-commissioned officers club at Horham, home of the 95th Bomb Group. John will know something about that. His father took off from Horham on the first successful daylight raid to Berlin on March the 4th, 1944. John talked about that in one of the previous talks here at the Georgia chapter. Anyway, you can see down in the lower left, this is the first time that I ever came to the Red Feather Club. I'd known about these beautiful murals that were painted by somebody that had something better to do or nothing better to do, and it could swing a brush. And they had this little minstrel setting and this kind of a Prince Charming, motif. But these are the original murals that were painted inside the club in probably 1944 or 1945, and they still remain there today. Interestingly enough, when I came there and saw the murals for the first time, I was with Roger Freeman, and there was no roof on the building. The rain was coming in. It was just sad. And so there, once again, the British had a very cooperative effort, and they said, we're going to save this building, and this is what it looks like today. You can see the original fireplace, and they hold lots of kind of 40s dances and things like that. It's a very real social place, not only a fabulous museum, but the British use it, for social occasions. So that just kind of gives you an idea. These are just old buildings from the war, and Edna can certainly probably attest to this. After the war, everybody wanted to forget about the war, and things along the lines of preserving all these things. They didn't come until years later, until maybe the history was a little bit more known, or you read the Mighty Eighth, or you saw 12 O'Clock High, or something along that line, and people just thought it was important to definitely preserve what happened there, because our young men served, our young men flew, and our young men died from those air bases, and they're very, very dedicated to it. Here's a couple of other examples. The 381st Bomb Group Museum up at Ridgewell. To the right of that, that's the main active runway, which is kind of almost Dean Jagger-esque in the opening scenes of 12 O'Clock High when he walks out into the hard stand. That's there's weeds growing up on it, but there's a beautiful memorial to the 353rd Fighter Group that was stationed at Raiden. And then, of course, the epicenter, the center of everything, is the beautiful cemetery at Mattingly, where there's 3,811 American servicemen and women that are buried there. So, Masters of the Air, everybody seen it? Right? What did everybody think, just out of curiosity? Everybody enjoy it? Yeah, I would agree. Too short, maybe too condensed at a time. I helped out in the early days with some of the historical contributions and things along that line to help the script writers give them some things. I had a very dear friend was Rosie Rosenthal. Rosie Rosenthal and I were very close, and I gave them 3.5-hour interviews with Rosie Rosenthal that I did out at his home in Harrison, New York. In fact, if you want to know something about Rosie Rosenthal, this is 2001. I wanted to do a story about the Munster mission that everybody saw in the miniseries, and there was an aviation artist that I'm sure some of you are familiar with called Gil Cohen, and he did a beautiful print of this thing called Rosie's Crew. And I wanted to write an article for the 8th Air Force Historical Society News, but I had one little thing that was kind of a problem. My wife and I, we waited a little late in life and so forth, but my wife was pregnant with my now 22-year-old daughter. We didn't know, we figured that was going to be the biggest Christmas present of our life, so we didn't peek. So we didn't know if it was going to be a boy or a girl, but at 23 weeks, my daughter wanted out. And, she's half done, if you will. That's kind of a bad way to put it, I guess. But anyway, we did a procedure that my wife did, and the consolation prize was she was on 100% bed rest for the rest of the ride. 4 months of bed rest. She could only get up, take a shower, and go back to bed. No stairs, no walking, no nothing. But she did it. And so during that time, I asked her, I said, hey, listen, I've got this opportunity. I want to go out to New York. Rosie and his wife, Phyllis, lived in Harrison, New York, which is just north of the city in Westchester County. And I made arrangements with one of her sisters to look after her, make sure she got her meals and all this and that. I jumped a jet and flew out to White Plains, grabbed a car, met Gil Cohen, the aviation artist, and went up to Rosie's house and asked him if I could come in. And I sat with them for 3.5 hours and had a back in the days when they were the mini cassette tapes, nothing was digitized. And wait, hold that thought. So I flipped the tape and all that. Anyway, so I had this wonderful afternoon. Well, at the conclusion of the interview, this Minnesota Presbyterian boy suddenly was invited to the kitchen of Phyllis and Robert Rosenthal, and Gil Cohen, who the aviation artist that accompanied me, he's also Jewish as well. So the Rosenthals brought this Minnesota boy back into the kitchen. They had proper egg New York bagels. They baked them, they put them in the toaster, and then I learned how the wrist action works to do a proper schmear of cream cheese, and then you put the lox on top of that, and a little bit of onion, and this and that, and then of course we had that with coffee, and we sat back, and I learned all about lox and bagels, which I still enjoy today. But he was persistent. I can't believe you left your wife. I can't believe you left your pregnant wife to come out here. Rosie, it's okay. She's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. So finally he said, well, you got to call me. You got to call us and let us know when the baby's born, if it's a boy or a girl. So the day came along, and I called him up a couple days afterwards, and I said, hey, Rosie, it's Mark Copeland. He goes, well, what is it? What is it, a boy or a girl? And I said, it's a girl. Oh, all great men have girls. My first one was a girl. Oh, blah, blah. 2 days later, just all of a sudden the doorbell rings, and I go out and the postman's holding a box, and he goes, you have to sign for this. I'm like, what is this? And I looked at the return address, and it was from Robert and Phyllis Rosenthal. It chokes me up today. all of a sudden I open the thing up, and what's inside? 2 days later, after I just told him about the birth of my daughter, was a small little cashmere ivory baby sweater for my little girl, and I still have it today. That was Rosie Rosenthal. Anyway, but talking about Masters of the Air, it has had a major impact to a lot of the museums. Most of them have just kind of I want to say kind of rode the wave of it. It hasn't really kind of changed the mission of any of the museums, and what they want to do in terms of the preservation. All of them kind of knew this, shall we say, this historical tsunami was going to come at them, and they've been in strong preparation for it. I don't see that happening. That it's really going to affect, like I said, the overall mission of what the folks in England, still want to do to preserve the history of the 8th. I mentioned about the flame keepers. This is just a couple of examples. This gentleman up here in the orange, Neil Holworth, just met him last week. He's a gentleman that's doing an amazing job on making a brand new museum, something that they did with they're doing with an operations hut that's still at Grafton Underwood, and they've got a major project. So new museums are being developed all the time. Improvements and additions, expansions to the museums are still being done, to this day. We also stop at RAF Debden, and down in the lower right, there's a gentleman, Corporal Dane North. This is kind of a hard place to get onto because it's an active British military base, but in terms of the historical significance to the 8th Air Force, this is where the RAF Eagle squadrons, the Americans that flew in the Royal Air Force, this is while they converged in September of 1942, and this is actually where 8th Air Force Fighter Command was actually founded on September the 29th of 42, and it turned into the 4th Fighter Group, the famed 4th Fighter Group of Don Blakesley, Don Gentili, John Godfrey, Jim Goodson, et cetera, the Red-Nosed Mustangs. They flew Spitfires to begin with, and they went on to I just want to put here, flew Spitfires, P-47s, then eventually Mustangs, and destroyed over 1,000 enemy aircraft in their tenure in England. So the last one down here in the lower left, we had a gentleman and his wife on the tour whose father was shot down in April of 1944. So we were almost to the 80th anniversary of that date. His best friend was also shot down that day. It was actually a pilot and a co-pilot, and they're interned at Cambridge. I called Susie up and I said, hey, this is the gentleman's name. His name is John Daly, and da-da-da-da. And she went to the trouble of taking us out to the grave. And this is what these people do. Taking us out to the grave, that's good enough. But she brought out a little bucket. Inside this bucket is a little Tupperware thing of sand. Well, the sand is from Omaha Beach. And they take it and she rubs it over the stone, and in the entablature, the sand sticks onto the stone, and she wipes it off with a sponge so the name pops out. And then we went out and she planted an American and a British flag there, and we said a few words, and it was just really special, especially for our guests there. And so this is just a little bit about what Brent said earlier. We've only been doing this for about 2 years. John O'Neill and Scott Lair at the museum reached out to me just because I've been to England many times and know people and all the rest of it, and they said, we really want to do this. Can you help us build a dream trip? I said, okay, what do you want to do? And so they said, we'll leave it in your hands. And so I made an itinerary, and then I made a list of these are just phone calls and emails. This is a piece of cake. We got to go here. We got to go there. But then I made a list of these would be really nice places to go to, but there's no flipping way we're going to get into it, but I'm going to really try my best. Well, I went after it and succeeded. We, aforementioned, get to go to High Wycombe, which is the 8th Air Force headquarters. That's Pine Tree. You'll actually get a chance to walk into Ira Aker and Jimmy Doolittle's office. It's incredible. And then once again in Debden, we stopped there. Basingbourne, where the Memphis Belle was at, that's a British military base as well. And so we kind of break the mold or break the break what normal tool operators are doing and really kind of go deeper into history. One of the other things that's really an experience on the right, we go into the Churchill war rooms, but we've got a really good relationship with them, and what they do is they open up the glass walls that people with their telephones are looking inside. Well, they actually open up the door, we go inside. And to stand literally at Winston Churchill's very chair in the cabinet room, and you can touch it if the guy isn't looking. It's an incredible experience. So anyway, this is just a real fast place. We go to, 5 B-17 bases, the 361st and the 4th Fighter Group at Debden, and then also at Duxford, so 3 fighter group bases, and then also a B-24 base at 453rd, where Jimmy Stewart flew out of. And of course we do the cemetery, as I mentioned, the Churchill War Rooms in St. Paul's Cathedral. We also give a lot of latitude for free time, because that's important. You kind of got to get away a little bit and do things that not as a group. And so we give a free day in London, for everybody to do that. We just warn everybody that we don't have any bail money in the budget, so don't do anything nuts. So anyway, that's kind of that. And we also do this, and here's a good example. We have a real flexible itinerary that also gives us a chance to where either I know somebody, we have a bus, or in Cambridge, I've even done it to where I rented a car and driven folks out to their loved one's airbase so they can touch it. I don't think it's fair that if we can't do that, just to say, well, if you wanted to go someplace, that's on your own. You can figure it out yourself. That's not what we do. There's just too much respect in it, and this was a good example. Lorraine Horn, who's this, not really great pictures of her, that's her last week standing in front of the monument at Grafton Underwood. That's her also on the right, walking actually on the foundation of her father's barracks. And he was shot down on the 11th of April of 1944, was a POW at Stalag Luft 3 for the remainder. And what we ended up doing is when she wasn't looking, we brought over an American flag. We do this for everybody. We bring over an American flag. And when she wasn't looking, on the right of the monument, you can see the flagpole. We lowered their flag. We put her flag on the lanyard, we pulled it up, let it flap for a few minutes, and lowered it down. And on the last night, we presented that to her, and it was on the 80th anniversary of her father being shot down. That was incredible when you can do something like that.
So those aren't on the tour. You're doing that special for those people.
Well, yeah, we're just doing that special.
So the rest of the tour is going to Duxbury?
Or Duxford or whatever. Yeah, and then we have the latitude where we can do that, and you might actually miss an air base. But do you want to see, if your father flew at Hethel or something like that, would you rather go see your father's air base or where Jimmy Stewart flew out of? We can, you'll miss a little bit on the tour, but it's worth it because it means more to the individual. Does that make sense?
Wrong, but no other tour company does that except
No. And then, of course, you have what I like to call the magic fairy dust that kind of falls down every time we do one of these things. So last August, I got a call from this gentleman who I'm sure you're all very familiar with, John Lucky Luckadoo, who's 101 years old. He's the last surviving original cadre co-pilot from the 100th Bomb Group. Of course, I'm sure you're all familiar with this wonderful book, Damn Lucky. And anyway, he called me up and said, "Mark, I want you to save 3 spots on your October trip. One for me, one for my daughter Lainey, and one for my son-in-law." And I held the phone, the phone went, what? Thinking to myself, oh yeah, 101-year-old World War II vet taking for 12 days in England. What could go wrong? Nothing. So we ended up doing it. John and Sue were blessed to be on the trip, and it was an incredible experience. And where this really kind of comes home about the respect that the English, the British really have for the 8th Air Force, not only the vets, but just the legacy and the history. Everywhere we went, we just stopped into a pub, and I mentioned to them, hey, we're bringing a 101-year-old actual World War II 8th Air Force vet. Told them their name. We walked into the pub, and they had this whole thing dressed up, welcome John, and they didn't give him his meal for free, but no, I'm teasing. But it was great. And if you know anything about his experience, we watched the thing at John's place last night on YouTube. Glenn Beck did an interview with him, and John talked about his best friend, this guy by the name of Leroy Sullivan. Leroy joined the Royal Canadian Air Force and flew in the RAF as an American, and he was killed in November of 1943. Well, on their free day in England, or free day in London, I called up John, and I'd been to Brookwood Cemetery where he rests today in the Canadian sector, and I asked John, I said, hey, listen, I don't know what you guys are doing, if you're gonna go goof around in London or whatever, but I said, I got a good idea. I got a bus, and what do you say about 10 o'clock, I'll have the bus come up and pull up, and why don't we hop in the thing with Laney and your son-in-law, and then whoever wants to go, and John and I went, and that was not only just a beautiful morning and a nice day to do something good for a vet, it was a life event. So we took him down, and this is the first time that he had been to his best friend's grave other than the day that he was laid to rest. And when he was standing there, and he started talking to the tombstone. And he was like, Sully, I've lived for 80 years, and there's not a day that I haven't thought about you. And it was just incredible. And anyway, there's John. We brought a couple of American flags and plopped them in the ground to better define him as an American in the Canadian sector. Another neat story was when we were at Mattingly. There's John in a wheelchair. We had that. John gets around really well, but we just had a wheelchair. And yep. Lucky John, yeah. Not you, John. That's right, Lucky John. Lucky. Right. Anyway, that's a gentleman by the name of Angel Mateo. He's the superintendent, the head superintendent of Mattingly, and he insisted that he push John around in the wheelchair for the visit. It was really incredible. And then these are three pictures. He 2 days, a couple days into a trip. We had set up that John was going to go up to Thorpe Abbott's, and that morning I got a knock on the hotel room door, and I was getting dressed, and I shared the room just for expenses with our tour manager. He opens up the door, and there's John's daughter, Laney, and she's standing there with a mask over, and she's standing against the wall of in the hall of the hotel, and I'm like, and she's crying, and I said, Laney, what's the matter? I'm thinking, oh no. She goes, me and Rick just tested positive for COVID. Oh, for God's sake. So we had COVID protocol, and it all worked out to where later in the week, once again, I rented a car in Cambridge, and I had the honor of bringing the last surviving 100th bomb group veteran to Thorpe Abbott's, and he had his day with his daughter, and we were up on top of the tower on the balcony, and he just stood there for a minute, and he didn't know I took this picture, but you can see that he's completely someplace else. He was looking out over the airfield that once was, his bomber base, and he was completely lost. I didn't say a word. I just waited, but I had to have that picture, and that was my thank you gift for all the work that we had to do. And then lastly, another very emotional moment. Like I said, these magic little fairy dust things that happen. That's Lucky turning a page at St. Paul's Cathedral in the Roll of Honor, which is incredible. So this is what we've got coming up here. I know that some or most of you guys are familiar with this. We're doing something a little bit different in regards to the commemorating the 80th anniversary of the Normandy invasion this year. We're going to do it's actually a long trip, but also a split trip, and I'll explain that. These are just some of the places that we're going to go to in terms of the Normandy visits. I won't bore you, but you can find more about that on our website, for some more information. These are some of the sites. Saint-Marglise, you can see in the upper right. You can see the effigy of Sergeant John Steele, or better known as maybe Red Buttons, in The Longest Day, hanging off the church steeple at Saint-Marglise. To the right is Pegasus Bridge. To the lower left is at the Airborne Museum, and of course another picture of Ike. This is a hotel that we have, the Hotel Luxembourg, it's called, in Bayeux. which is only about maybe a 3-minute walk to the cathedral on the lower left, and that's where it's contained the famous 1066 Bayeux tapestry. And we give you an opportunity to have a nice day in Bayeux to get a chance to experience that, or go shopping if you got to get a t-shirt for the grandkids or something like that. So anyway, we're also going to be joined by this gentleman. His name is Dominique Francois. Very, very astute author. He's lived all his life in Normandy. He's written about 8 books on the Normandy invasion. His forte is the American airborne operation, mostly on the 82nd and the 101st. He's going to be joining us, and he's well connected in terms of some of the locals, and is going to take us to some places that normal tour companies, they don't either A, know anything about, or they just don't have the wherewithal or the connections. Case in point, we all watch Band of Brothers. Second episode, Day of Days. We parachute with Dick Winters out of the C-47. We land. Later in the episode, he gets assigned to take a squad to knock out some 105 millimeter guns at Breakhor Manor. And of course, it's this epic, well done in the film, and it's still taught that action is still taught today at West Point to the cadets there. Anyway. But Dominique knows the owner, this guy by the name of Charles Devalier, who I met, and he's going to allow our group to come to his property. He's going to take our group especially out to the area. It's all gone now. There's no evidence that the bunkers or any of the guns were there, but the area where it actually happened, he's going to do this and teach us about it. Then we're going to go back to a chateau, and we're going to have a champagne reception in Breakhor Manor. Why not, right? Anyway. So this is the tour dates for that long trip. It's the 12th through the 27th of 2024. We're going to begin the trip in Southwick House in England, and the D-Day portion. This is the map room that's still there from 1944, and this is where Eisenhower and all of his entourage actually planned the invasion. The next room is the conference room where the decision was made. Commander Stagg came in with the weather report. The chief meteorologist said, "Here's your window, General Eisenhower. This is the best time. The seas are, it's not perfect, but this is the best shot that you've got to pull this thing off." So he cleared the room. He had all the smart guys around the table. There's Bradley, there's Montgomery, there's Lee Mallory, there's Trechard, Admiral Ramsey, and got all their opinions. And then he got up, he walked to the back window and stood looking out at the back garden at Southwick House, crossed his arms, stood there for a couple minutes, and he turned around and he said, "Okay, gentlemen, let's go." And that's where the decision was made to go to start the invasion. And once again, we're going to have another champagne reception. So anyway, this just tells you a little bit about it, but here's the thing. A 16-day tour is a long time, and one of the feedbacks that we got was guys that are still working, I can't get that much time off. So we're starting the tour actually on a Saturday to a Saturday. You can just do the front half of it, which is a 7-day 8th Air Force tour, and then we have a break in the middle, and then we start actually on the 20th, and that's when we go over to Normandy. And so we've broken these things in half, which is a lot more affordable. We have a great website on our website, a company we call We Travel that we use, and what they also give you the luxury to do. I'm going to, just after I get back home, and I'm going to post the fall of 2025. So that's a year and a half away. And it gives you the opportunity to put a deposit down, and instead of writing this humongous check, you can just pay a little this month, a little this month, a little this month, a little this month, and you can kind of make a payment plan, so to speak. So when the time comes in the final payment, you got it done. It's all set to go. So anyway, these are just some of the respective prices, and everything is included except see on the 8th Air Force tour, there's 2 dinners and 2 lunches that aren't included, and on the Normandy tour, there's one lunch and 1 dinner that's not included. Beer and wine at every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. All the VIP admissions, all the gratuities. You basically have everything paid for virtually before you go. Airfare is not included. Thanks for pointing that out, John. And then also we have another tour that's later on to address that. The reason why we don't include airfare, think about it. Okay, let's say that we have somebody here in Atlanta that wants to go, another person in Des Moines, Iowa, another person in Bangor, Maine. Well, how are you going to get all these people on the same airplane? It's a nightmare. It's a complete nightmare. So that also gives people the option to do an extension to where they can show up early to acclimate or see some sites on their own before the tour starts, or do it afterwards. And also people have air miles and they want to use their Delta Sky Miles or whatever, to pay for the trip. So that's why we don't include airfare. Anyway, also, just to know, Tuesday, June the 22nd, we're going to embark on our first domestic tour, and that is the Georgia World War II Trail. We're going to start at the museum. The museum will be yours. Early in the day, you have a full run of the museum, and then we load up a motor coach and head down I-95, and we're heading down to the National Homefront Museum in St. Simons Island. We're going to catch a lunch in Brunswick, a nice buffet lunch, before heading down to St. Mary's Submarine Museum, and then we load up and we head back to Savannah. It's a nice day from about probably 9 o'clock until roughly 5. We're gonna do that. So I've got some literature that I can share with you if you want to join us on that. So that's kind of a breakdown of the educational travel initiative that we began at the museum. And it's really I don't want to. You never badmouth your competition. You never talk bad about that. But I can tell you, and I'm very proud to say this, is that nobody touches our tours. Nobody does anything to the depth or the immersion of what the National Museum of the Mighty 8th Air Force is doing. So if you've ever thought about, geez, one of these days, I guess all of us always you will say that, but we only get a certain amount of time, and in that time, it's up to us to eliminate as many of those. Someday I wish I'll do this. Live life, and if there's anything, if you have the financial resources and things along that line, John has been, and Sue have been on 2 tours. Joey's been on 1, and it's a great experience, and you won't regret it. So, in conclusion, I just want to say that the friendly invasion, or our bond with the British friends, it's never been stronger. It's never been more committed. And as far as the museum that we all love, we've really made a big presence that's never been done before in the history of the opening of the museum. We've really shared a lot of information about not only the tour initiative, about our expansion and some of the exciting things that are happening, down at the museum right now. So, and our common purpose to close out is, between our 2 countries, is just to never forget the sacrifice of the airmen of the 8th Air Force during World War II to free the world of the most evil tyranny that humankind has ever seen. And it's up to us in terms of our duty and our obligation to make that, preserve the patriotism and the legacy for future generations. So I want to thank you all for a great afternoon. Thank you for the warm welcome, and thanks for letting a Yankee come to Georgia. So thank you.